Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Future History Project, the ongoing, somewhat biographical sketch of Isaac Asimov. And last time we left off at around 1960, he had published The Intelligent Man's Guide to Science through Basic Books. It was 2 volumes, and they wanted to cut it. They did actually cut it, but they wanted to cut it a lot to make it a lot shorter. Asimov did hold out for that, but they insisted on putting an introduction by another author in. This did not please Isaac Asimov at all. He doesn't mind doing introductions for other people, but he did not like having introductions done for his own books. And up until the time that the autobiography was written, it was the only book of his that had an introduction by somebody else. So he says in the autobiography. And this sort of sketch, this one's going to be a bit short because uh, I have some notes here, but I had sort of left off taking detailed notes for quite a while, and I was going to go back and sort of rectify that, but I never got around to it yet. And so yesterday sort of rolled by and realized, oh, I need to do the next one. And I figured, oh, well, I'll get to that, but I'm hip deep in reading a long book at the moment, so I just kept putting it off, and then now it's Wednesday, so I'm behind. So we'll do this one short, and then what I'll do is I will continue on with it after that. So we're going to go to about mid-1960s here. But and in We're still in 1960 itself. In May, Asimov was able, he looked through a telescope for the first time. He had never looked through a telescope before. So this was the first time he did in May 1960. And and also in 1960, John W. Campbell changed the name of Astounding to Analog. And this was one of the things that Asimov could never really forgive Campbell for. And a lot of fans disliked that fact that he changed it. It was something that Campbell wanted to do, actually, right from the beginning. He wanted to actually initially just call it science fiction. But then somebody else started a magazine at that time, so he had to leave it. He did change the name slightly from Astounding Stories to Astounding Science Fiction, I think, and Fact, possibly, or he added that later. But he was finally able to change it in 1960. But as I say, to a lot of fans sort of were disgruntled about it. And also by this time, Asimov was getting a bit weary in some ways with John W. Campbell. He realized the importance John W. Campbell had in his own writing career, and he was faithful to him to a certain extent, but he's distanced a little bit, and it sort of really began with the Dianetics, with L. Ron Hubbard, and then a lot of other little things like Campbell at some point started his little thing, the Hieronymus machine, and it was supposed to be something that you put your hand on top and you twisted it's really weird, like a little gear, and then you rub the hand on it, and it's supposed to become sticky. And then he started getting into uh, you know uh, ESP type stuff and all these things, and he thought it was all scientific. He he proposed it as being scientific results. Campbell did, and Asimov didn't really care for this, and he got him into trying this little machine, the Hieronymus machine, and and he says, "Oh, well, what do you feel?" And Asimov said, "Oh, well, it's not sticky. It's or it's sweaty or something like that." And it's like, and so Campbell wrote down something like, "Oh, great result, opposite of sticky," or something like that, and that proves everything. So yeah, he Asimov just sort of rolled his eyes, but he kept being a bit distant from him because of that, and a lot of other things. Campbell went into some other stuff, saying that he was a expert in atomic power or weapons and things like that, and he was going a bit strange. Let's put it that way. Uh, and in 1962, Asimov published 6 books, but his he earned $72,000 from his writing that time, and that's in 1962. And I think that's the last time he says in his autobiography or somewhere around then of the amount that he says. It does come up again, I think, in 1970, where when or in the early 70s, where he was, well, we'll get to that. He was getting a divorce, and the newspaper said he made basically $250,000 in the one year. But in 1963, there was an anthology for stories that were in the Unknown magazine that Campbell had was editing, and he did the introduction, but also too a short story of his author was added. It was bought by Campbell, but the magazine became defunct before the story was published. So it was put into the it was 20 years previously, so it was added to the anthology, and Asimov really liked that aspect of it. Like and he began to like editing and putting together and putting introductions to books. Um, yeah, and the 19 we mentioned this when we were reading the stories uh, of the robot stories. Galley Slave in 1963 was contacted by uh, a professor from the University of Rhode Island English department, and it was his first sort of experience with plagiarism of his material. And Galley Slave came out in 1957 in Galaxy, and and the English professor came and said a student handed in Galley Slave as his own work, word for word. He never knew what happened to the student, but he never sort of pursued it in any way. But it was his first, he notes it as his first experience of plagiarism. Um, yeah, and in February 1963, he met Carl Sagan for the first time, and they became sort of friends. And Sagan, Asimov wrote down that he's in his diary, and he recounts this in the autobiography, that he says Sagan was smarter than he was. So he met somebody that was smarter than him, so he thought it was worthwhile to put down in writing. And then also in 1963, there was the World Convention in Washington, D.C., a World Science Fiction Convention. And Asimov had been writing the Hugo, or not writing, but putting together the Hugo stories and doing an introduction. And he humorously put in that, like they got him to do it because he never won a Hugo Award. And so at this time, he was presenting the Hugo Award, so he knew he was going to get a Hugo Award. But then it came to, but he got a special, but he gave himself his own special award for his fantasy and science fiction science articles. So he got that, and it was a bit of a joke that was played on him there, that he gave himself his own award, because he was a bit just, he thought first of all, that he wasn't chosen to give uh, the award, which he usually always was, and so he thought, well, maybe he will get it this time. But then all of a sudden, the person couldn't do it. I forget who it was. It was a friend of his. I think it might have been Theodore Sturgeon, possibly, but then then they got him, so he figured, well, no, he's not going to get it, and then he wound up giving himself the award. So, um, yeah, we're sort of nearing the end here for the stuff I have notes of. In November '63, he was at a space exploration conference. He met Werner von Braun, and he didn't know how he was going to be able to deal with this, because Werner von Braun has the history of using, Jewish slave labor, um, and then he was, on working because of his V-2 rockets. And Asimov actually shook hands with him, and he felt very strange about this because it was like one handshake away from shaking hands to Hitler, he thought, that he shook hands with. And it made him very uncomfortable with that. But I think that's where we're going to end it. So I do apologize. It's a very, very abbreviated one this week, but I'm gonna get back to it a little better next week. Fingers crossed. It's just I started reading the like, I think it was about a third of the way in the second volume, and I sort of stopped taking notes, and I didn't realize that until I was almost finished the book, because I just sort of plowed through the end of it. Uh, because it was written so well. But we'll get back to it, because we're going to go up to, like, there'll be one or two more maybe, sort of chronological uh, videos about his life, because it's going to go up to sort of. Well, no, it will go a little further. It'll go up to his death, I guess. So there might be two or three more, and then I'm going to get into these specific ones. That deal with, his relationship to other authors and things like that. So I'll do little videos regarding that. So anyway, I hope everybody's doing well, and I do again apologize for being a day late with this, and a little more than a day late, but and then we'll get back to normal scheduling program next week. Fingers crossed. Take care, Buck 2.